Good morning, fight fans. Happy Sunday. It's a rainy, kind of gray Sunday here in Atlanta. Anyway, wanted to talk real quick about the action last night. And of course, I'm going to go talk in detail tomorrow night on the Neutral Corner. That's 7 p.m. live on my YouTube channel. That's Eastern Time, 4 p.m. live for you guys on the West Coast. But Julian Hurd-Williams, minor upset over Jarrett Hurd in Fairfax, Virginia last night, PBC on Fox. Look, I say minor upset because a lot of you guys are calling us the upset of the year and everything else. I still think that's Cancio over Machado, but this was a very minor upset because I've been telling you guys for weeks that this was going to be a very competitive fight. Don't sleep on it. This was going to be a great fight, best matchup of the year so far, in my opinion, and it turned out to be the fight of the year so far. It's nowhere near upset of the year, though, because those of us who have followed the career of Julian Hurd-Williams, and I'm one of them, I've watched this guy for years since he was a prospect, I've been following him all along, knew that he had a really, really good chance in this fight. And he was a very live dog. And I told you guys that for weeks leading into the fight. I told you not to sleep on it. We had dueling cards on Fox and ESPN last night. I told you Fox has the better main event. That's the one you need to watch live. As it turned out, the PBC card was kind of finished before the, I think the co-main over on ESPN started. So the scheduling kind of worked out pretty good. Anyway, a lot of you guys forgot about J-Rock and slept on him when he got knocked out by Jermall Charlo, who's now a middleweight, a couple years back. I want to say it was in 2016, so it was a few years back. And after that, he kind of suffered, man, because he kind of was put on the back burner by the management at PBC and kind of, fought second-tier fighters on undercards and everything like that. Had to work his way back up. Finally got a chance again against Jarrett Hurd. And there were things, look, those of you, I know a lot of you guys out there, have certain opinions about me and don't follow my work and for whatever reason. But those of you who do, you know that I was the only media member, again, the only media member after that Charlo-Williams card, which was in Los Angeles. I want to say that was at USC, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it was in Los Angeles. I was there. I was the only media member that asked the promoter, Richard Schaefer, about drug testing for that card. And you guys, there's videos of it out there. Go look it up. But I asked Richard Schaefer point blank, was there any drug testing for this card? USADA, VADA, was there any advanced drug testing? And he didn't know. He did not know. In fact, he looked just completely shocked by the question. He even looked and turned to Charlo and kind of asked him, were you drug tested? Kind of like under his breath. There was zero drug testing at all. Zero drug testing for that fight. And I'm not trying to throw accusations out there or throw shade or anything like that. But by the way, Richard Schaefer, not the biggest fan of me after doing that because it was kind of embarrassing because he looked bad. A promoter, if you're promoting an event, you should know about the drug testing for that event. You should know what's going on. You're basically a project manager. You should know every aspect of, you don't have to know the details, but you should know the high level information of what's going on. And he clearly didn't. Anyway, look, I'm not trying to throw accusations saying this guy did this, that guy did that, but neither Charlo has ever had advanced, extended drug testing for any fight, any point in their career. I think Jermall is now in the clean boxing program. He's enrolled in it. And a lot of you guys out there, you don't understand the way that program works, and you think that that means a fighter's automatically clean. The overwhelming majority of fighters in the clean boxing program don't even get tested, okay? So it's a great idea, that program, but there are major flaws in it. And the biggest flaw is budget. That's the problem. There's just not enough money that the WBC is putting up. I applaud the WBC for doing the program, but the budget that they have is maybe 1/10 of what it should be. And most fighters enrolled in the program don't even get tested in a calendar year. Okay, so being in CBP looks good. It looks bad if you don't want to do it, and some fighters have flat out refused to do it. That's a really bad look, but it doesn't. It's not the same thing as doing an extended 3-month, 4-month period of drug testing during camp for a particular fight. That's, you know, what Gennady Golovkin has been doing for years, and several other fighters. Anthony Joshua was doing it in Jermall Big Baby Miller. You saw what happened to Jermall Big Baby Miller, right? So, and that was the first time Miller had done advanced extended testing like that in boxing. He had been busted in kickboxing before, I think just with a random state commission test. Anyway, so look, this time around, again, I'm not going to go into the details of some of the shenanigans that were going on behind the scenes with that Charlo-Williams fight. I will tell you that I'm privy to some information that I cannot go on the record with. I spent some time talking to some folks connected to the situation after that fight. And yeah, there was some stuff going on that makes you kind of, you know, an eyebrow raises when you hear some of the stuff that was going on. Again, doesn't mean there's proof of anything, okay? Just putting it out there. Let you guys come up with your own conclusions. But for this fight with Jarrett Hurd, J-Rock's team, Stefan Breadman Edwards, his trainer, demanded that, hey, we're going to fight in your backyard. Hurd is from that area of Fairfax. I think it's from Maryland, but, you know, it's all connected right there to greater D.C. area. We'll come fight in your backyard. We'll challenge you for your titles, but we're going to do VADA testing. And they did VADA testing, I want to say, 3 months, 90 days before the fight. And I'm not throwing any accusations out there at Hurd or anything like that. There's, you know, not saying anything like that. He made weight easily, just, not easily, but he made weight clearly, as he has for every other fight. He's a massive junior middleweight. No doubt he's going to be at middleweight pretty soon. And I think it might be time for him to move up because he looked lethargic in this fight. I think it's time for him to go to 160. But they wanted VADA testing, and Hurd did that. So clearly, J-Rock and his team took lessons learned from that Charlo fight. Not excuses. They never made excuses in the media for that loss or anything like that. But they said, look, we ain't playing that game again. If you want to do this fight, we want VADA testing. And there was, I believe, 3 months of VADA testing prior to this fight. An extended length, you know, of VADA. Best testing in boxing. You saw it was a complete joke in boxing. They do okay in other sports, but in boxing, complete joke. It's worthless. It's not worth your money unless you want to have the availability to purchase TUEs. So anyway, both fighters clean in this fight. We can sign off on that with confidence. Both guys clean. And what you saw was Julian J-Rock Williams using a better game plan and executing that game plan better throughout this fight. And I thought that some of the commentary, and I think Larry Hazard was scoring this for PBC, he did an awful job. This fight was not nearly as close as he had it. Sadly, some media members, senior media members, had Hurd winning this fight, had this fight way too close. I think the most generous score you could go with is 8 rounds to 4. I think you could go 9 rounds to 3. If you're scoring that 7 rounds to 5, that fight, you're basically giving every swing round to Jarrett Hurd. Either way, I thought that it was very, very competitive. It wasn't a one-sided domination. In terms of rounds, it could look one-sided because if you scored this 9 rounds to 3, I ain't mad at you. But Williams clearly did the better work. He had the better hand speed, much better technically. And in the first couple rounds, I think a lot of you guys, and myself, you know, included at first, I'm like, what the hell is he doing? Because he kept getting inside on Hurd, getting right up in his chest, getting inside. And Hurd likes to be up on a fighter. He's a big, tall guy, but he likes to fight on the inside and use his weight to press on you, push forward, and kind of steamroll. And that's how he always, you know, he eventually starts rolling downhill against fighters and wearing them out. That's what he did with Harrison, with Lara, I think with Trout. I think he fought Trout. So that's how he uses his physicality. But what J-Rock did that was so genius is he get up in his chest, right? And would not allow him to move forward and steamroll him. And when he did, he was so close that the punches Hurd was landing were glancing and sliding off, and he didn't have full extension. Hurd never really punches with full extension. He doesn't have a very fundamentally sound jab, but if he is allowed to push you back and get some space with you moving backward, him moving forward, even though his punches, his jab's always like here, it's not here, right? It's not extended here, it's more like this, you know, it's a little bent. But because he's coming forward and punching down at you and you're moving backward, it has an effect. It has an accumulative effect. J-Rock was up in his grill. And when he did get pushed back a little bit, he made sure he got close enough to where that arm was bent here. And Hurd simply does not have the fundamentals to be able to adjust the arc of the shots and put a little bit more of his waist into it, a little bit more of his core into it to get more leverage when the punches are truncated, right? He just doesn't have those fundamentals, at least not as good as Williams. Williams, he didn't spin him a whole lot, but he did do a good job for the most part, spinning and turning Hurd, or at least getting angles, being on this shoulder, being on that shoulder, again, so that Hurd could not get his core into it when he was shooting those uppercuts, when he was shooting those hooks. They were arm punches. He was doing this a lot, right? And it looks good for the fans there in Fairfax, Virginia, who wanted Hurd to win because he's the local guy, so they were screaming and hooping and hollering. And some of the commentary, you know, they must have heard the local crowd a little bit too much, have been influenced by that. Larry Hazard, who did the media scoring for that fight, obviously was influenced by the crowd because that was a bad scorecard that he had. He had the right guy winning, but it was just too close. But in the end, okay, Hurd pulls it out. And again, I'm going into a little bit of detail, but I'll talk more about this and we'll have some live chat back and forth about it tomorrow night on the Neutral Corner. So make sure you guys tune in. But what I really wanted to talk about real quick is sleeping on a fighter because he gets a loss. Look, guys, I understand a lot of you younger guys just started watching boxing over maybe the last 5 years or so, right? And you came in at the very tail end of the Mayweather career, and especially a lot of you guys who are big PBC fans and PBC supporters. Floyd brought you in, and you're used to hearing about O's, right? The undefeated record, right? You guys got to have that O on his record to be an elite level fighter. And that's just pure bullshit. There's so much that can happen in a fight that ends up, you know, results in you losing. It doesn't have to just be you being outclassed, right? When that happens, yeah, that like in my opinion, Mikey Garcia was completely outclassed by Errol Spence earlier this year. I don't care if they were both the same size. Errol Spence is just a level above Mikey Garcia. And to an extent, I don't like using this word because it's overused, but to an extent, Mikey Garcia got a tad bit exposed in that fight because he's just not at the level, pound for pound, that Errol Spence is. He's just not, right? So that's a case where a guy got a little bit exposed, a little bit of the mirage got pulled away, right? But then there's other cases where, man, you just might get blown out. You just might catch a shot and you get stopped. Or maybe you come into a fight injured. Or maybe there's something going on shady behind the scenes. Or maybe you get robbed on the cards. There's a million different things that can happen that can lead to a loss. Or 2 or 3 losses. And some of you guys make such a big deal about that and you just forget about it, dude. And somebody like Julian Williams, you just thought was a B-level fighter now. You thought coming into this fight, he's a B-level fighter. Oh, he got lucky last night. No, he's always been a very fundamentally sound, very good fighter who had the skill set to win a title. I remember seeing him as a prospect thinking, this guy's going to win titles. I thought that about him. Did I ever think he was going to be like the top pound-for-pound fighter or something? No, I didn't think that. But I thought this guy has the skill set to win titles. Right style, right game plan, right night, he's going to win titles. And that's what we saw last night. For Hurd, do I think he got exposed? No, I don't think we learned anything new about Hurd. I think Hurd fought Williams kind of the same way he fought everybody. But you look at Erislandy Lara, a little long in the tooth, and his style is to back up and counterpunch. That's perfect for what Hurd wants to do. You can say the same thing about Austin Trout. You can say the same thing about Tony Harrison. The folks at PBC know what they're doing when they do this matchmaking thing, right? They know exactly who Hurd would look good against. Against Julian J-Rock Williams, they bit off just a little bit more than they could chew because Julian was able to come forward and he was able to use just his superior hand speed, footwork. His footwork is light years better than Hurd. And full extension on these punches, man. On the outside, his jab and everything else, he was really knocking Hurd's head back. And on the inside, because he was softening him up from the outside, on the inside, he was able to outmuscle him in spots, which I think it surprised a lot of people. Didn't surprise me. And I know there are plenty of you guys out there who picked J-Rock, who bet on him. I know there's several of you guys who bet on him out there and favored him. And even those of you who thought, like I officially thought Hurd would win a decision. That's what I thought. If, you put a gun to my head and forced me to make a pick. But I thought that's because there would be some hometown judging. I thought any close swing round he was going to get. And I thought that he was possibly going to win like 115, 113, 116, 112 in a fight that looked like it probably could have been a draw or slightly go to J-Rock. That's like officially what I thought would happen. But the judges got it right. And quite frankly, Williams won even more soundly than I predicted. So anyway, I don't think Hurd got exposed in any way. I think that everything we learned about him last night, we already knew about him, right? Everything we saw last night, we saw the same flaws against those other fighters, but in terms of styles, matchmaking, and career trajectory when he fought those guys, you saw a different result for a reason. Guys, remember, styles make fights. And a lot of you guys are making this whole triage, this comparison of, well, Hurd beat Harrison, who beat Charlo. By the way, that was a different Charlo. There's two Charlos. He didn't beat the Charlo that beat J-Rock, but I understand where you're going with this. A lot of you guys on Twitter were saying, Hurd beat Harrison, who beat Charlo. Charlo beat J-Rock, and now J-Rock beat Hurd. How does that happen? Guys, A plus B does not equal C in boxing. And all these mythical scenarios, well, this fighter beat this fighter, and this fighter beat that fighter, so if that fighter fights this fighter, he's going to beat him automatically. No, that's bullshit. And that's more crap that didn't start with the Floyd Mayweather era, but it was really exacerbated and it blew up in the Floyd Mayweather era. I don't want to make this an anti-Floyd video, but a lot of Floyd's fans that came into boxing and just watched him are ignorant. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. And that guy manipulated those folks to make himself filthy freaking rich. So a lot of those guys have this idea in their head that, those whole comparisons, A plus B equals C, doesn't work that way in boxing. Styles make fights. And you got to think, guys, this isn't a 7-game series like you see in the NBA, right? There's no injury timeouts. There's no injured reserve. There's no second or third string like in the NFL. On any given night in boxing, anything can happen. And when one guy puts it all together on one night, he can shock the world. Again, I don't necessarily think that Williams shocked the world last night, because I think those who really, really follow and understand the sport of boxing, especially, there aren't many members of the media who have actually fought and sparred and trained themselves. But, raising my hand here, there are a few of us who have. And those of us who actually have that experience, we see subtle little nuances in certain fighters, and we understand styles make fights, and we understand matchups. And I think that there are some guys, again, the guys last night in the media who scored it for Hurd clearly have never spent 2 seconds in the ring. They don't understand what they're seeing. But those of us who have, and again, my level of experience is, this much, okay? I'm just saying, maybe 200 rounds of sparring in my lifetime. That's 200 more than most fight media, whether it's boxing, MMA, whatever. Man, I'm telling you, we saw something in this matchup, and that's why I've been banging the drums for this fight for weeks. So over at ESPN, they had fights last night too. Look, PBC had the better fight, period. They had the better fight than Top Rank and ESPN. Now, I understand on paper, you were promised more action, more offense, more punching with what happened over at ESPN. But in my opinion, and you guys go back and watch last week's episode of TNC, I told you this in the breakdown, those fights were more predictable. I thought that Burchell was going to steamroll Vargas just because of where they're at in their career. I thought it might get ugly. I even tweeted this. It might look like the 4th fight between Israel Vasquez and Rafael Marquez. It wasn't quite that brutal, that bad. It was action-packed. They threw like, I think, 1,200 punches combined in 6 rounds. So it was crazy offense. But it was 6 rounds to 0 for Burchell. And by about the 4th, 5th round, he really started to dominate. And Joel Diaz, Vargas's trainer, props to him for stopping the fight. I wish that it happened in the co-main between Manuel Navarrete and Isaac Dogboe, where Dogboe took 12 sustained rounds of absolute brutal punishment 4 or 5 months after taking 12 rounds of sustained brutal punishment from Navarrete in the first fight. And his corner should have stopped the first fight after about 7, 8 rounds. They should have stopped this fight after about 6, 7 rounds. Unfortunately, finally it ended halfway through, I think, the 12th round. Dogboe's career is over. These 2 beatings he took at this much bigger, much stronger kid who punches down with leverage. 5'7" versus 5'2". All right, do the math on that. Just these 2 beatings he's done. He is absolutely finished as a top tier fighter. And he said after the fight, he's having trouble making 122. He's a super bantamweight. He wants to move up to featherweight 126. That's a terrible idea. I understand why they want to do it, because he wants to be comfortable making weight. He's thick. He's built more this way than this way, right? But he needs to maybe have 1 fight at featherweight in his homeland and against a C-level opponent, so he can eke out a victory and then ride off into the sunset. Former champion, made some good money, but dude, he doesn't need to be fighting any of the killers at featherweight. That will end very poorly for him. Anyway, guys, so just wanted to give you my quick, immediate, it's not an immediate reaction, it's a 12 hours after reaction to last night's action. And we will talk more about this in detail tomorrow night on TNC. All right, guys, so be right here on my channel, 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night, and be ready for some good chat. Always love chopping it up with you guys. I'll see you at the fights.